Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone, ZP002. Back with me today on the show, my co-host, Jamie Franks. Jamie, welcome back to the new and improved look here at the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast.
Thanks, man. It is good to be here as always.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening, those that are listening. But it feels like so long because so many things have changed in such a short period. I mean, the last time we did a podcast, I did not have a Christmas tree in my living room, and now I do. And now you have a different podcast up, and so
Yeah, I know, that's right. I mean, like we've talked about many times on here. We record these sometimes weeks in advance. We've got a kind of a show schedule laid out there, and the reason we do that is because there's times, obviously, where you're with your busy schedule, and obviously with everything that's happening in my world, we can't always record every week. And it's been actually probably 3 weeks since recording. Since that time, we have started to move the HQ. So that's why there is a new podcast studio. So here it is. We have changed up our background. The lights are all still the same, and you got the same awesome people running this thing. But if you are new to the channel, this looks normal for you. If you're not, then this is something different, and it is new. So I got to tell you, doing this podcast is probably the most exciting thing that I do on a weekly basis, because I get to explore these topics. And, I spoke to our mutual friend there, and he's telling me that because we're closing in on 100 episodes, man. And that is a huge accomplishment, apparently, in the podcast world. We are in the top 1 percentile. Now, again, these are all facts from another human being, and I have not vetted them to see that they're accurate. But apparently, if you get to 100 podcasts, you're in the top 1 percentile of all podcasts out there. Now, granted, that's a lot of podcasts and again, the numbers didn't compute for me. I was like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But because there are so many podcasts, like, it could be 100,000 of them that have this many episodes. I look at, guys like we're on the Firearms Radio Network. If you guys are not aware of that, through Apple Podcasts, we're on the Firearms Radio Network. And when I look at their shows, I mean, they're at 300 plus episodes. I was just like, holy cow, that's a lot. But we're closing in on 100. We'll have to do something exciting. Maybe I'll wear a different color shirt. I don't know. Who knows? You'll get a little bit crazy here. But the other question that was raised is like, are you guys, you're getting a lot of monetary, you're getting advertisers on it. I was like, no, man, I don't really do this for that. I mean, sure, if anybody that's listening to the show that has a company and they want to sponsor the show, great, we'll talk about it. We'll work with your brand, and that would be awesome. But I do this you and I have conversations, and we get done with the conversation. We're like, well, we probably should have recorded that. That would have been a good show. So I do this just to get information out. This is the media portion of what ZERT is all about. Whether we're talking about a product like the SIG regulator or the macro or the Alpha Dog Arms EG1, whether we're talking about some of the companies that we work with like High Viz Sights and Rad Palm and Alpha Dog, it's just getting information out for members and for non-members, whether we're talking about the training like we just did out in Oklahoma and what's coming up in Kansas and North Carolina. It's all just information. And that's what I love about it. And like, as you guys know, we always publish our shows on Thursdays on Spotify and on Apple. And then the YouTube version comes out after this show is released on those 2 audio versions of podcasts. So
yeah, that's that is the good thing about doing the podcast, the way it has been up to and through now. I've heard other people refer to it as a pirate ship. Like we can do whatever we want. We can say whatever we want. I can tell you that this holster's a piece of crap and that this one isn't, because we're not bound by any sponsorships. And as far as that goes, this podcast really isn't going to be about any specific product, but any piece of gear or any product or any brand or anything that you've heard me reference in the past is just because it's something that I have and that I use and that I would recommend, and probably, I was about to say almost none of it or next to none of it, but I think none of it is anything I have any official affiliation with.
No.
And I mean, if for what that's worth, like if somebody from Safari Land is listening, I will, I would 100% accept a sponsorship from you guys, or I would accept the offer to become affiliated with you, because I have given a crap ton of my own money to Safari Land because their holsters are awesome. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. I have spent, a bunch of my money and my time and some of the government's money too. But yeah,
obviously we have the social media platforms. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Obviously we just announced or talked about that we have a YouTube channel. We have an X profile. We do have a TikTok account. We do have a Discord now that members have been using to chat, because it's a little bit more free than some of the original ones we just talked about. The social media pages, obviously it's huge. We have over 300,000 people that follow the main ZERT page. And we try and put just a variety of information out on that page, whether it's about, sales we have going, deals that are coming up, training that's coming out, training that just happened. And we jump in on the whole meme, I guess the internet meme posts every once in a while. And those are the great ones. I got to tell you, some of those have been just awesome. And today's show is based off of something that we just talked about recently. And it's something that's pretty important, and it kind of ties into a bunch of different topics that we've talked about recently. I just did a video, the follow-up on the SIG P365, the macro that I had malfunctions with earlier in the year that stopped me from carrying it. And then I went and got to bring it back to the range and to shoot it again without the frequency of malfunctions that I had, but I did have a couple. And I did bring a bunch of different ammo out. And I know that was one of the initial contenders when it comes to the malfunction. So today we're going to talk a little bit about ammunition, and the post I'm referring to is, we put up a post on the whole 9mm versus 40, or no, 40, was it 40 or 45? I know, 40. I think it was 45. No, I think it was 45 because it was stopping.
Oh, okay, because maybe
right.
You're right, because the comment section quickly descended into the 40 cal versus 9mm thing. But
the comment section was awesome. And the original post, it's that whole office gif where it, and I know I'm going to get tarred and feathered for this, but I didn't watch The Office, so I don't know the name of the character. I know.
I'm an Office super fan, but yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Whoever Bill Krasinski's character is,
John Krasinski. He's
John
Jim.
Krasinski. Whatever. He has that whiteboard in the back, and it's two different facial expressions. But yeah, it's 45 is better than ACP, and the whole follow up to that was, but 17 rounds is better than 8. And yeah, the comment section was an amazing place to be during that time. Some of the posts, some of the comments that people had were great. I mean, it's all in fun, and I hope that there wasn't too much aggression in there towards the end. But that post went on for a minute, and we just kind of let that one go because it had some interesting back and forth.
That's so funny. Like, to me, I don't know, maybe it's an age and maturity thing, but like, to me, it's so funny and so like amusing, and it motivates me to like kind of to instigate even harder. Like when I can tell people are like actually getting mad. Like, what are you getting mad about, dude? Like,
I mean, it is just a post on the internet.
But,
and I am going to go back and I'm going to look through that post to see if anybody brought up 45 gap. We just need to keep that alive. We need to keep mentioning that caliber just so everybody knows it was a thing. And yeah, people probably still have that pistol because they thought it was the next big thing. So for all you 45 gap lovers out there, I salute you. that being said, the issue that I had with the macro, and then I think Paul had an issue with his carry gun. We talk about it a lot in our podcast and our shows, that you need to shake out your gear, and that includes your carry ammo. Like if you've had the same carry ammunition in your firearm for 2 years, you probably should shoot that.
I just did that.
Yep, there you go. That's the stuff you want to make sure runs good through your firearm.
Yeah.
Making sure your Winchester white box, full metal jacket, 115 grain cheapy shit, like that's cool and all, but you don't carry that ammunition daily.
Well, hopefully you don't.
Well, yeah, exactly. Hopefully you don't carry that ammunition daily.
I bet, like hashtag real talk, I bet you would be surprised by how many people actually probably do daily carry that ammo. I'm probably related to a couple of them. So.
Yeah. I know that,
because
I know
this box of ammo, I can get 50 rounds of this for $9, but this one is 25 rounds for $30. Yeah. I'm like bullets are bullets. Yeah. Like in the movie Trimmers, when Burt Gummer goes to the general store and has the guy place an order for ammo, and he gets the wrong ammo, he's like, I don't know, Burt, I thought bullets were bullets. And a lot of people do think that.
Yeah. Not the way. So just to give you guys a little bit of a backstory, if you weren't aware, I obviously, during my time with ZERT, I also worked for other companies in the firearms industry. 3 of those companies happen to be ammo manufacturers. So I've, whether fortunately or unfortunately, have been embedded into the ammunition world, and it's a love-hate relationship with it, because it's just such a nightmare to be at times, but it's can be cool. You definitely do learn a lot. Learning about all of the different kind of calibers and the bullet weights and the ballistic coefficients, all of that stuff is pretty awesome. But when you come down to it, I'm a 9mm 5.56, 223, and a 300 blackout guy. Like those are my 3 calibers.
You lost me at the end.
Well, but it's suppressed, so I got you back.
All right. Well, yeah, you won me back a little bit there.
It is, right. and it is only suppressed, by the way. It is, because it's Connecticut. It is a pinned and welded suppressor, so it's permanently affixed, and it is running subsonics. That being said, it serves its purpose, and everything else is just 223, 5.56, or 9mm. One of the first real insights into different ammunition that I saw was back when I ended up meeting a company called Polycase. They've since gone out of business, but they came out with oh yeah.
I think I still have a couple of boxes of Polycase ammo over here.
The Polycase, which it's weird because it started as a polymer cased ammunition, and then it quickly became a copper polymer
projectile
injection molded projectile. So it was a copper plastic bullet that did not transform, I guess, if you will, on impact. It used fluid dynamics. Now, very similar to Lehigh Defense and what some of the stuff that they were doing, but this was where Lehigh Defense was all copper. This was copper and polymer, and it was injection molded. Very light.
One time I killed a guy with an ice bullet, and when it hit him, all the evidence just melted and turned into water, and I never got caught.
That's a movie. We will not get into. You and I are going to talk about a movie I watched over the weekend, and I'm so pissed about it. Called Elevation with Anthony Mackie.
I haven't even heard of it, but okay.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I was hoping you were going to discuss Wicked.
No. I did see Gladiator 2 though.
Oh yeah,
another time. So it's light for caliber, the Inceptor, and they initially came out with the self-defense rounds, which were called the ARX. So it was the Polycase Inceptor ARX. That company ended up going out of business, and then they were taken over by a company called Quantum Ammo, who continued with the line. And by that time, they had the the self-defense ammo, which was their ARX, and they had their RNP, which was their round nose projectile, which was their equivalent of ball ammunition, still injection molded. And then they had their they used the hunting or the ARX in the hunting calibers. I can't remember. I think it was preferred defense, preferred training, and preferred hunting, whatever. They ended up the brand ended up being managed and sold by Norma. And when I went to work for Norma, I had a little bit of involvement there. Norma then ended up coming out with their own injection molded line called the NXD. And so that's that. Inceptor ARX is still available, and you can still buy it on their website. And it is still a round that I carry in my spare mag. So it was, seeing some of the data on that round was pretty awesome. Like seeing what it did on soft tissue, I was like, holy cow, this thing is effective. I mean, you're talking about a 65 grain 9mm projectile that moves at about 1700 feet per second, 1649, I believe. And then they went like all buck wild on it and did like a plus P version. I'm like, oh God, wow, that's crazy. But the 223 was I believe it was either a 35 or a 45 grain projectile, dude. 27 or 2900 feet per second. Dog.
Yep. I used to shoot I think they were Hornady projectiles, but in competition, like for matches where I knew I wasn't going to have to be shooting anything like particularly long range, I would shoot these little, I think they were 42 grain Hornady projectiles that were something nuts like that. But they had very light recoil and cycled my gun really quick. And and they were great for punching holes in paper. But
all of that light for weight caliber stuff like that, or that lighter grain weight, those are all screaming fast. But when we talk about ammunition, again, it's likely the first thing to be blamed when you're out on the range and you have a malfunction.
There's some validity to that.
Right. I'm not saying that there are not instances where it is not the cause of the ammunition. If you are reloading ammunition, you may have issues.
Well, not even, yes, if you are reloading ammunition, you may have issues, but also like, and I know this is a huge thing, and this is probably going to ruffle some feathers out there too, buying remanufactured ammunition, like, because now you're buying ammunition that was reloaded by, like, at least if I reloaded it, maybe I can iron out what I did wrong.
Right.
But when you're buying remanufactured, in finger quotes, ammunition, like, you may be buying ammunition that some gun shop hired some kid part-time to just sit in the back room and press out bullets, and you don't even know what you're getting. You don't even know who it was reloaded by. And I mean, I had to sign an NDA, but I bought some remanufactured ammunition from a well-known ammunition company, and it blew my gun up because it was a rifle round that was loaded with pistol powder, and it exploded a very expensive gun in my face.
Wow.
And
that's not a good time.
But so there's also ammunition that's just known to be bad ammunition. There's a Turkish ammo company that does not have a very good reputation right now, because who knows where their components are coming from, and who knows what their QC is, and and like there is a such thing as just bad ammo. But I will say, in my experience, like, especially, that's the good thing about getting to be an instructor is you get to see all these different guns that people bring out. So like, I definitely have the guns that I lean towards as my favorite, but probably the overwhelming majority of manufacturers of malfunctions that I've seen are because people are modifying, either they're modifying too much stuff on their gun, or they're modifying things on their gun that really, in my opinion, shouldn't be modified, or a combination of both. Blaming malfunctions on the ammunition, to go back to the point, it can be a valid thing. And I know everybody wants to be in love with this idea that, look, my gun can run any ammo and it doesn't matter. that cool, but again, my favorite saying, you have to accept reality on reality's terms, and
Yeah.
that's not always going to be the case. Like,
I know it's not, but I feel like it should be. And you and I have had this conversation, especially when it came down to that macro. It's a production gun, and Winchester White Box is some of probably the most popular ball production, just ball training ammo out there. It should run. But and I even said this in the video that I just did. I fully believe it was not the ammo, because I ran that ammo through 2 other firearms the rest of that day without issue. So again, if you just shake that stuff out, and you can easily determine what you're going to do. But that was just basic ball ammo. And obviously, I think that we're talking to a community here of people that understand some of the terminology we're using. Obviously FMJ, full metal jacket, ball ammunition, JHP, jacketed hollow point. You got monolithic hollow point, and there's obviously differences there. We're not going to get into get deep into the science of different types of ammo, but there are a bunch of different types of self-defense ammo out there. And that obviously comes in all calibers, whether it's 9mm, whether it's 45. How you end up choosing what you think is best is all up to you. There are plenty of videos out there of people shooting federal 9mm 124 grain HSTs into gel, so you can see what it does as a representation of the human body.
So if you ever get a gunfight against a block of gel, you're gonna
win. You will win the gunfight.
I would say, just like, ballistics gel tests have their place, because it's a consistent medium that simulates, is the important word, that simulates soft tissue, and it's just so you can have an even comparison against different things, right? Like, because when you're talking about the scientific method, it's all about repeatability. Like, I need to be able to conduct an experiment, and then you need to be able to conduct the exact same experiment and come out with the same result, whether we're talking about vaccines or that famous experiment where people thought flies just appeared out of nowhere. But anyway, the scientific method, like that, ballistic gel is good for that, because it's a consistent medium that's repeatable, and so it gives you a baseline comparison to compare different things. However, if we're actually talking about what's important with bullets, I would rather trust a coroner's report than a ballistics gel data. Like what has actually worked in killing people, because ballistics gel, it's a good analog, and they even have the ones now, you can buy the ballistics gel dummies that have bones and organs in them, but even it's all synthetic. It's not real human bones and real organs with covered in real skin and clothing and stuff. And I mean, so I would say the most, I guess, prolific or common self-defense calibers, I would say, like, smallest to biggest, it's probably 380, 9mm, 40 cal, 45. Is that?
I'm sorry, what are we classifying?
Self-defense, like pistol round, defensive pistol rounds, common. Because I mean,
yeah, definitely. I would say those are your most common. I mean, 357 Magnum. If you're doing the whole wheel gun thing, again, talk about the day and age, right? 44. But now you've got people out there, companies out there making 10 mil in a respectable platform, where now people are loving the 10mm. I mean, traditionally that caliber was a good bear gun. I mean, a good bear caliber. It did some damage, and it seems to have made a resurgence back into the mainstream, whether it is accurate or not. You've got calibers like 357 SIG out there, which, it's not a bad caliber if you look at it ballistically, but it doesn't really hold its place versus its competitors.
Yeah, so, like, I already said one of my favorite sayings earlier. You have to accept reality on reality's terms, and one of my other big favorite sayings is that, especially like this is true in a lot of areas of life, but especially in the firearms industry, there are no free lunches. Like everything is give and take. So like I would classify those like as like niche calibers, like 357 SIG. They're great. They definitely will kill another person. Like 10 millimeter, it's funny to hear people out of one side of their mouth crapping on 40 cal and out of the other side of their mouth saying how great 10 millimeter is. Like 40 cal is just a shortened 10 millimeter. That's all it is.
Well, true, but that's what makes that round. That's what makes that round crappy. Is it is shortened and it's snappy and it's just not. You're right. Diameter of the projectile, it's the same. By the way, the diameter of the 9 millimeter projectile versus the 380 is
that's right. The 380 is just a shortened 9 millimeter. Right. Yeah. And so, like, quick story. So, of the things I've done in the military, I was a Navy rescue swimmer for a long time. And then because I was a rescue swimmer, the Navy paid for me to go to National Registry EMT school. And so I was in the Navy and the Navy was paying for it, but the EMT school was civilian run or whatever. And so as part of my EMT certification, I had to log, a certain number of hours, actually like riding an ambulance, like actually riding EMS. And I was going through EMT school in Chicago, which, that's a great area.
Yeah.
So I saw it with my own eyes. This kid got shot and the bullet went through a pane of glass and shot him in the chest. It was a 380 and it was wintertime. I went through EMT school in November time frame in Chicago. So he was wearing like a heavy coat and the bullet passed through a pane of glass and then shot him in the chest. And, of course, like part of our immediate actions, if you will, is like to remove the clothing, expose the wound.
Yeah.
We used like our EMT shears to cut his clothing and pulled his clothing open to reveal his chest where the gunshot wound was, and the bullet just fell out. Like on.
Wow.
So the bullet, like the tip of my finger here, this like first knuckle of my finger, that's about how deep the bullet had gone into his skin. So right. I mean, maybe a slightly more than a quarter of an inch.
Yeah.
But it had taken some clothing with it, like kind of into the hole. And so when we pulled his clothing back, it pulled the bullet out and the bullet just fell on the ground. And that was the day I decided I would never, ever carry 380. But,
so, and just so everybody is aware, we could literally make this a 3-hour podcast. Somebody recently told me to watch a 3-hour podcast about a topic that's in social media right now. And I'm just like, I don't know how I could watch a 3-hour podcast. I know Joe Rogan's
rhyme with Baco.
No, it rhymed with Manti Hero.
Oh yeah.
Modcast. But we could make this one that long because you can really deep dive on ammunition and ballistics and whatnot. Obviously, the FBI testing for ammo is, some say, antiquated and ridiculous. I remember vividly watching the videos over and over and over because it was in our booth at trade shows, and I was watching the ammunition go through sheets of drywall, layers of denim. Like, you have got to perform through all of those barriers, and they kept saying that the Inceptor was barrier blind. Now, do you want barrier blind ammunition? Oh, I don't know. I mean, sure, to go through clothing in Chicago in the winter, yes. Do I want it to rip through drywall so it enters my neighbor's house and there's collateral damage? No, I don't. So I didn't know where I fell on that spectrum, but that like you alluded to with those ballistic dummies, great. I'm so glad you're shooting those. Now put a puffy coat on it, please. Put some denim on the pants, please, and let's see how it does, because that's going to make a lot of difference on what I carry. Now, what you just said about the coroner earlier, we did get reports we did get contacted by coroner's offices to basically say, what the hell is this stuff? Because holy crap. It was recovered without fracturing. So the only time that the projectile would come apart or fracture is on super dense bone, like a femur or stuff like that. But otherwise, when this bullet goes into flesh, it comes out the other side fully intact, which is wild to see.
Well, so that was a long time. That was the FBI's big takeaway out from their testing, because this goes into it, like, besides caliber, goes into the other side of the debate of what's more important between expansion and penetration, meaning using like a ball type ammo that, like you just said, stays together and retains its shape and punches all the way through a target, or like hollow point ammunition or defensive ammunition that expands to create that, and it expands and deliberately doesn't penetrate, but creates a whole lot of damage within the cavity. And so for a long time, the FBI data suggested that penetration was more important than expansion. And to me, that goes all back to, what's your sample size and where is your data coming from? Because before you can get enough data to reach a conclusion, you got to have bullets actually finding their targets. So, like, to me, like most everything else, the caliber debate really is rooted in training and whether or not you can hit what you're aiming at. And so, so now we have this pool of people that are in gunfights. Well, who's actually hitting what they're aiming at? Well, it's trained people. Okay, well, who are trained people? Military people. For a long time, for a big portion of my life and my shooting career, caliber didn't matter at all, and ballistic coefficients didn't matter at all, and muzzle velocities didn't matter at all, because I was shooting a gun that was handed to me by Uncle Sam with bullets that were handed to me by Uncle Sam, and that was my only choice, and it didn't matter. It didn't matter if it was hollow point. It didn't matter if it was 62 grain or 55 grain or 147 grain or whatever. Like, none of that mattered, because here's your gun and here's the bullets that go in it. Now go shoot it. And I always said, when I was on Top Shot, I always said that was actually, I think that's why military people tended to do better on Top Shot, because we never had the luxury of custom hand loaded ammunition and customized, triggers and custom sights and whatever. Like, we had to learn to shoot with what was given to us, and without having any choice. So back to the, penetration and expansion and where you're getting your data. Well, who hits what they're aiming at? Well, trained people do. Well, cops do, and military people do. And in a lot of agencies, I think that's starting to change now, but for a long time, it was seen as inhumane to shoot somebody with hollow point ammunition. It's funny because, like, I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was that black talon ammunition, and it was like, banned in all these states. But now basically, like federal HST is black talon ammunition.
Yeah.
Now.
Well, like, the whole thing with the black talon, it was supposed to be Teflon coated, and it would go through vest. And it's like, well, what vet? Like, no, I don't know that was it, but it did. It got its fair share of hate, like the pit bull and the high point.
But yeah, so a lot of people that were shot with ball ammunition died because they were shot by people who knew what they were doing, not because the ammunition was, super awesome or not,
Yeah.
So,
well, going back to what you said about expansion versus penetration, have you ever seen ballistic clay used?
I don't know that I have.
All right. So ballistic clay is pretty wild, because what it does is it shows you what the maximum expansion will be. If you've ever watched a high speed video, which I don't understand why they call it high speed, but it's super slow motion,
because the frame rate is high.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah,
I know. Yeah. But if you ever watch a high speed video of a round going through a gel block, you'll see this thing widen, open up huge. And then when it goes back, it's just like a small, it's like this. but that maximum expansion is what you're really looking at. That's what you want to pay attention to.
Mhm.
And what ballistic clay does is it shows you what that maximum
It
expansion
preserves
is.
that maximum expansion point.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh yeah. So seeing that ARX, that Inceptor ARX through clay, I was like, holy crap, you're talking a giant cavity. And that when I go back, when I talk about that fluid dynamics, it uses the fluid in the body to create the wound channel. So
I saw a video of Terran shooting a pile of cow dung, and that was pretty devastating.
That's awkward. What was he shooting it with? His pit viper.
It was before that. You've never seen that? It was like a
No.
viral social media video. He did his thing where he quick draw and point shot.
Okay.
At this, because they were shooting a 3-gun match somewhere, and it was like natural terrain instead of like in range bays, and there was like a huge pile of cow shit, and he drew his it was a TTI 2011, but this was prior to John Wick's existence. But so Terran draws his and I think it was a 40 cal 2011, and he draws and goes pop 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 and shoots this big gooey pile of cow shit, and it created quite a cavity as well.
I bet, and created quite a stench. It is interesting that 2011s they're chambered in 40, but I think it comes with mechanics of the firearm and weight.
Or 9mm major, which
yeah. But so going back to, or I guess kind of linking this thing back to the post, one of the arguments between 45 and 9mm is, I guess, capacity versus stopping power. And it's hard to even say it because that's the argument that people make, stopping power. But
it depends on how it's used and who's, because stopping power and knockdown power, typically what people mean is basically something that doesn't exist. Basically, this gun is so big and so powerful and shoots such a big bullet that when I shoot you and a bullet hits you, it's going to knock you down. And that doesn't exist because, going back to the scientific method, everything, has an equal and opposite reaction. So if a bullet was big enough and powerful enough to hit you and knock you down, it would knock me down when I fired it, because that would be the equal and opposite reactions. But the thing that aggravated me in when I read that, because I participated in the comment section as well, is people that are like, well, 40 cal has almost no ballistic advantage over 9mm. Well, it either has a ballistic advantage or it doesn't. Try telling your wife you've almost never cheated on her, and see how that goes over. These things do matter. It either is an advantage or it isn't. And 40 cal does have a ballistic advantage. Now, like I said before, it goes back to there's no free lunches. So with that, even though it is a slight advantage, it is an advantage. And do slight advantages matter? I would also argue yes. There's race car drivers that their race car produces 500 horsepower. They have a switch in the race car that disconnects the alternator, because the alternator puts just a little bit of drag on the engine. Maybe that's a 1 horsepower difference, but race car drivers, they'll turn off their alternator. They'll disconnect their alternator for the last 2 laps of the race, because that'll give them 502 horsepower for those last 2 laps before the car runs out of electricity. So these little things, they do matter, but they don't come for free, because with this little bit of advantage, now you lose magazine capacity. And then does that matter? And again, I would say yes, because I'd say you're hard pressed to find somebody that's ever been in a gunfight, that survived the gunfight, and then after the gunfight decided to carry less ammunition. So yes, capacity does matter. These little advantages do matter. So why don't we make there is no bullet that fits all the bill. The 45 offers a significant advantage over 9mm. But it's huge and expensive, and you lose half of your capacity with 40 cal versus 9mm. Typically, it depends on the gun, but typically you're only talking about 2 to 3 rounds of magazine capacity lost. 45 is an awesome round, but it cuts your magazine capacity in half. So
now, again, yes, it does in certain platforms, right? But the platform matters just as much. Yep. I mean, I carried for a while. I carried a 1911 45 as that was my daily carry. Shooting that gun was very comfortable and very nice and very accurate. And I'm going to lose my man card for this, but then I went and I got a Springfield XTS chambered in 45. Now that's a 3.3-inch barrel with a cheese grater for a grip shooting a 45. Like, you know, yeah, you'd have to get the extended grip to get the full 8. It was a subcompact 45. I mean, not fun at all to shoot.
I had a Glock 30 SF, and it was the same thing. Like,
Yeah,
it was a number. I mean, the slide was as wide as a D cell battery,
right.
and it just was not fun to shoot. It just didn't shoot good. I
No.
just plain and simple. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
know
And
exactly what you mean.
so, then I think that was it. From there, I went to the 9mm realm. But I will tell you that I did start my journey with 40 caliber because it was the next best thing at the time. And I remember the SIG that I got, I was like, oh, well, you could swap out the barrel and you could have it was a SIG 2340. And you could swap out the barrel and have a 357 SIG. I was like, oh yeah, cool. That's the coolest thing in the world. And then of course I had to have the James Bond gun, the Walther PPKS. Going back to that 40 caliber, I mean, I was new, I was young, I was novice, I didn't know shit. And I was just like, yeah, okay, cool. But, looking back on it now, I'm happy where I'm at caliber wise. I guess what's taken me a minute to accept is the carry ammo when it comes to ammunition. I understand the ballistics behind 45 and 9mm, and I choose 9mm because of capacity, and it really comes down to shot placement and being accurate versus, like you said, I'm going to shoot you and it's going to blow you back. I'm just going back. I mean, what was the movie with Bruce Willis? It was Old Western.
Oh, it was no.
Dude,
It wasn't Old Western because if you're talking, he had two 1911s.
he had two 1911s.
Shit. That's gonna
and
drive
that
me.
I mean that
But
scene
he
where
was like in an old Western town, but it was in
Yeah,
like
he
the
was.
Great Depression era or whatever. I
Yeah.
think.
But
God,
yeah, we're gonna think about it in a second. I'm gonna look it up in a second because we are gonna figure it out. But when that dude rolls out with his two 1911s and he hip fires the bad guy, I mean, he literally shoots him down the street. He goes
Yeah.
like a tumbleweed. He goes flying back, and you're just like, oh my god, what are we doing here? And again, it's Hollywood, so it is what it is. There have been incorrect depictions of what ammo does since the beginning of time, and it will continue. But
if he hadn't shot the guy and the guy flew all the way down the street, he wouldn't have been the last man standing.
That's it right there. It is last man standing.
Yeah, but so yeah, that's the miss of down power, I think, or stopping power when people misuse that. But I can actually give you an actual example of actual knockdown power. And so when I compete in 3 matches, USPSA matches, like I said, for my first 10 years in the military, I knew nothing about bullet weight, muzzle velocity, because it didn't matter. I shot the gun they gave me, it went with the bullets they gave me. I didn't really start understanding and learning a lot about ballistic coefficient and different bullet weights and bullet types and the impact. And, that especially comes into play on long range shooting. But
oh yeah,
in pistol shooting though, my 2 main guns that I have set up for competition, I have a Glock 17L and a Glock 35, and they're set up identical. They have the same grip, the same stippling, the same magwell, the same sights. Everything is the same, but one of them is 40 cal, one of them is 9mm.
Okay.
In USPSA matches, in official USPSA matches, you have to chrono your gun, and because they chrono your gun to get the muzzle velocity of the bullets, like they'll just randomly show up to you during a stage, and they will take your magazine out of your magazine pouch, and they will take rounds out of your magazine, and they'll take it and chrono it, because some people try to cheat, and they have chrono ammo, which will pass the chrono, and then they actually shoot with softer hand loaded loads. But anyway, assuming we're not cheating, I swear to God, I never cheated with that. I've never got into the reloading and tuning my gun for the little puff loads and all that stuff. But when I shoot an official sanctioned USPSA match where I have to chrono my gun, I'll shoot 40 cal in those matches, because 40 cal, there's a whole mathematic formula that they do, and they come out with a number that's called your power factor.
Right.
And for scoring purposes, you either fall into major power factor or minor power factor. Well, so there's the line between major and minor. 40 cal is just over the line, so you can take just factory off the shelf 40 cal ammo that you got at Bass Pro Shop or whatever, and it'll make major power factor for a USPSA match. Well, off the shelf, 115, 124, 147 grain 9mm that you also got at Bass Pro Shop, it will be just on the left side of the line, and you'll make minor power factor, which means you have to have much greater accuracy. So if I'm shooting a gun that's major power factor, all I have to do is get 2 rounds on the target, and I basically get 100% for that target. Where if I'm shooting a gun that's minor power factor, I have to get basically 2 bullseyes to get full credit for that target. What I saw shooting these 2 guns that were set up identical, I want in official USPSA matches, I wanted to be able to be in major power factor for the more lenient scoring. But these 2 guns, basically in my hand and all my manipulations and sight pictures and everything, the guns for all intents and purposes shoot the same. The 40 cal does have a little bit more recoil. And again, I lost a few rounds of capacity, but in these matches shooting steel, I noticed knockdown power. There's a target that we have to shoot in competitive shooting called a spinner, and it's basically a target that spins 360 degrees.
Right.
And it has like a steel plate at the top and one at the bottom, and you have to get the target spinning. I could shoot that 4 times with my 40 cal and get it to spin, and I would have to shoot it, depending on my accuracy and timing and everything, I might have to shoot it 10 or 11 times to get it to spin with 9mm. So now that 40 caliber bullet, whether anybody likes it or not, or whether wants to admit to it or not, is hitting that steel harder and knocking it down better than that 9mm. There's the we call them poppers. I don't know why they're called poppers, but it's just like a silhouette shaped steel target that just falls down when you shoot it.
Right.
A popper, I can shoot it 1 time with a 40 cal, it'll fall down. And a lot of the 9mm, a lot of the poppers, I'd have to double tap them with my 9mm to get them to fall down. So the 40 cal does hit harder, but I'm losing mag capacity. But it took me less shots to knock the target down. So now I've made up for that loss in capacity. So,
right.
It's give and take. But
now
your story you were telling a second ago, real quick.
Yep.
It reminded me of a major point to this debate or discussion is anybody that can shoot a 45 or a 40 cal really well probably means you have really good fundamentals. You have a really good grip on the gun. You have a really good sight reference and sight management, and you're doing really good follow-up shots and with your trigger press, because all your fundamentals have to be so locked on to manage a gun that has that much recoil. So from an instructor standpoint, I would argue that anybody that can shoot a 40 or a 45 really well can probably shoot a 9mm even better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so we obviously went into a little bit of competition there. And as you alluded to a little bit before that, where this stuff really gets interesting is for hunting, for precision rifle shooting, as a sport. But for the everyday firearm carrier, what does some of this mean? Should they go with 115 grain or 124 or the heavier 147? What does that mean when it comes to muzzle velocity? And is muzzle velocity more important than muzzle energy? And there's a lot that goes into it. And what I would love to do is, anybody that's listening to this and has stayed this long, and we appreciate you, thank you for being here, but I would love to hear in the comments down below, what do you think about like what are you choosing your caliber and grain weight for? Okay, so if you've chosen 9mm 124 NATO, what made you choose that versus the 115 grain? The muzzle velocities are not they're negligible. They're not that different.
That's the perfect word. They are negligible. Yeah. Bullet weight does matter in terms again of that terminal effect on the target, whether we're talking about steel targets in a competition or whether we're talking about a person that we're shooting. The bullet weight does matter. Because I go super nerd on a lot of this stuff. If you loaded, if it was my gun and I gave my magazines to you and you loaded one magazine with 115 grain, one magazine with 124, and one magazine with 147, I could shoot all three magazines and I can tell you which is which. However, because I'm such a nerd, I purposely, when I go teach a class or whatever, I will deliberately load my gun with a mix of all of it. I'll put, because as you know, you've seen, like, I'm a big proponent of the now drill. I think a now drill, passing or failing a now drill, I think is a big indicator of a person's overall shooting skill level. So I will deliberately shoot my now drill with my magazine loaded with just a variety, like, there'll be 215 grains, one 124, five 147s, another 124, two more 115s, two more 124s.
Right.
And I'll shoot my now drill just so, because I would say I shoot 147 grain the highest percentage of the time because I like the way it feels in my gun. I feel like I shoot my gun better on 147s, but I want to be able to shoot everything. So I load my magazine with a tossed salad of the different ones so that I don't get accustomed to it, because the 115s are a little bit snappier. The 115s do feel a little softer is not the right word, but it's definitely like a heavier recoil impulse, which I like. And then the 124 is the middle ground, but also I've found that somebody smarter than me probably knows this. There's probably a reason, but most defensive ammunition, it's most common in 124, or
Right.
I should say 124 grain is the most common bullet weight of defensive ammo. So
Yeah.
in the vein of training like we fight, you probably, if you're using 124 grain defensive ammo, maybe you would want to train with 124 grain target ammo. Like,
yeah. Now, like Hornady has a critical duty. I think it's 135 grain out there. There is another federal out there, which is it's like a fracturing bullet. It's like 158 grain. It's really unique. Just a side note, the higher the grain weight, the easier it is to suppress, to make that subsonic. So looking at your favorite caliber 300 Blackout, a subsonic is, I think, 130 grain, where the supersonic is 130, where the subs are 220. Obviously that just slows the projectile down, that allows you to suppress it easier. If you want to suppress your 9mm firearm, you need 147 or higher to make it subsonic. Now, 124 grain is the NATO, where obviously 5.56 is the NATO. So that does hold, if you want that matters to you.
And our training ammunition for 9mm is this. I think it's kind of hard to find in the civilian world, not because it's like super awesome, super secret military ammo, but I think our training ammunition for 9mm is 112 grain, which is weird.
Really?
And, yeah. Yep.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that grain weight. I mean, again, negligible.
Yeah.
Between 115 and 112, you would never know, but that's weird. So that, all of this being said, again, like I said, we can take this for 3 hours to talk about this stuff. We could literally break down every caliber and get into the jacketed hollow point versus semi-jacketed hollow point, and what's the difference between a bonded round versus non-bonded round, and back to the monolithic hollow point. Like, if you look at, and it's weird that Norma did away with this caliber. I loved it when it came out. But again, they said it didn't perform well in the FBI testing. and it was the Norma MHP, the monolithic hollow point. When this thing opened up, it was the most beautiful flower. Like, I would have literally shot a magazine of them to create a floral arrangement for my desk at the office. But it was such a beautiful, the way that it opened up, and it had 100% bullet weight retention. And obviously what that means is it went in and it was 108 grains. It went in loaded and into the casing, brass case, or actually it was a nickel plated brass case at 108 grains. And when they shot it and it came out the other end, it was 108 grains. When you shoot anything else and that bullet transforms and you weigh that bullet at the end, it weighs less than what it did going into the body. So that's obviously that's an important feature for some if you're looking at deciding what you want to carry.
And if you want to get really scientific into it, like there have been lots of data to suggest that quote unquote hollow point rounds are more accurate than pointy bullets. That's where for rifle rounds, that's where the open tip match, the OTM round came from, was because for long range shooting, they found that this quote unquote hollow point bullet was actually far more stable for a farther distance. But in the military, because Geneva Convention, you can't use hollow point ammunition, so they couldn't call it hollow point. So that's where the term open tip match came from for these hollow point long range bullets.
So in the military, are they giving out 223, 556 or 556? It's obviously in open tip match, or is it
77 grain?
77 grain. Huh,
yep, 77 grain OTM is the new hotness.
Yeah.
And then for the for our sniper rifles, it's the 308, the M118 LR, which it's basically the
7.62 by 5.1.
Yep, and it's essentially the same bullet as like the federal gold medal match.
Okay.
Open tip match.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to the meme versus the, what's better, the 45 is a giant bullet. And it obviously, a bigger bullet does make a bigger hole. A bigger hole could constitute to more blood loss. More blood loss could equal the gunfight being over sooner. Those are all things that you need to weigh. Obviously, I don't own a 45 right now just because it hasn't found a excuse me. It hasn't found a way into oh man. Yeah, I know. It hasn't found a way back into my collection. Sorry about that. Would I bring one back and carry it? I mean, yeah, I would definitely bring one back. Would I switch to carrying it? Well, probably not. I mean, I would love to get another 1911. Again, I'm happy with where I'm at with the calibers that I've chosen. 300 blackout included. You're welcome. But I know what I've chosen and I know why I chose it. And I do understand that it doesn't matter if it's 9mm, 380, 40, 10mm, 45 gap, 38 special, 45. You got to go out and you got to shoot it. And like we said in the beginning, like, do not leave the range. Now, if you're going to the range every week, okay. But if you're going to the range once a year, don't leave the range with the carry ammo that you came in with. Like, shoot that ammo. So I don't know. That's kind of my opinion on the ammunition part of it. Like I said, we can go real deep into.
Yeah. And I'll give you my closing thoughts. Is the ammunition debate really comes down to one thing: can you hit what you're aiming at? And that comes down to, surprise, training. Again, I would say from an instructor standpoint, from a fundamentals of marksmanship standpoint, anybody that's really good at shooting a 45 or a 40, you probably could put a 9mm in their hand and they could probably shoot really good with it.
Right.
So, in a gunfight, it's all about making those follow-up shots. You can make faster follow-up shots with less recoil. 9mm is the best. I would say, again, like I just straight up would not carry a 380, but because of what I saw with my own eyes, I think 380 is underpowered. I think 9mm is more than adequate to kill another person. And now, depending on your setup, depending on what gun you have, you can conceal carry a 9mm handgun that's got like 26 rounds in it. And like I said earlier, I don't think you're going to be able to find anybody that ever survived a gunfight that now wants to carry less ammo. So 9mm is more than adequate to kill somebody, and I want to give myself as many chances as possible to get those rounds on target. And then, again, 40 cal and 45, they cost more. So a greater cost probably translates to you training less because your ammunition costs more. You're probably going to train more if you train with a less expensive round like 9mm. And then again, for all intents and purposes, you could train with 124 grain target rounds and then go out and when you're carry with 124 grain defensive rounds, and not be like all those people that were trying to save money on 223 and 556 ammo by going out and training with a 22 long rifle upper, which is it's not the same.
Right.
I guess that's better than not training, but
true.
But I think all those things considered, like I said, I think I have a really good understanding, probably better than most, of the advantages and disadvantages of all the different calibers. And in competition, I understand under certain circumstances there is an advantage to shooting 40 cal. So I do that only in competition. And I guess I'll wrap just by saying, having a good understanding of all of this, I carry a 9mm 100% of the time. So I will sing the praises of 40 cal for certain instances of competition shooting, but I carry myself, I carry a 9mm 100% of the time. So gotcha. I would carry a 45. Like I do own two 1911s. Because I kind of feel like you can't be a gun guy without one, and I have students show up with them, and so like I need to be able to teach a student that has a 1911. So I need to have experience on a 1911. But I hypothetically would, but man, like to get through 24 rounds is 3 magazines where my 9mm just has 24 rounds in it. So like
two quick stories, and then I want to finish the last point.
That's all I got.
We'll wrap this up. Last year we took that EDC class, or I took that EDC class up at SIG, the VTAC EDC class. There was one guy that ran that class with a 1911. And Kyle would make the joke like, all right, everyone come to the line loaded with 2 magazines, fully loaded. And he was like, all right, 1911 guy, come with 4.
5.
4 or 5 rounds just to get the same number. Secondly, I remember the 1911 that I carried back in the day. I wanted to buy some badass self-defense rounds, and I did buy a box of Lehigh Defense, $49 for 20 rounds of the Lehigh Defense, whatever, critical chaos, whatever it was called, or fracturing chaos, whatever. But it was obnoxiously priced. With that being said, and this is my final point before we sign off. We talked about this in a video as well, not a podcast. It was a video that went out. Ammunition prices are continuing to rise. The powder shortage is real. It's not just a joke. But every manufacturer across the board has taken a price increase. We are doing what we can to stay ahead of it and understand how long it's going to be. We'll see now that there is a new administration taking over, and if there is a chance through that, I don't think it's as bad as the primer shortage of 2020, but it is causing ammunition to go up. So understand that for the foreseeable future, the ammunition that you are looking at today will not be lower than the price that it is today. So just be aware of that and plan accordingly. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for spending some of your time. I hope you enjoy the new podcast look that we have going on here. Thank you for being here for 91 episodes, which is the most recent one that went out, obviously, at the time of this recording. We are excited for 100 more episodes. And again, without you guys, it wouldn't be as fun. So please make sure that you are liking and subscribing, commenting, if you will. And until next time, Jamie.
My sign off is always, it's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart. And Chris just made an outstanding point. Like, if you're waiting for ammunition prices to go back to what they were in 2005, it's not going to happen, just plain and simple. And so being smart is buying ammo before you need it. So when we do run into these situations like we did in COVID and like we did in 2013 after Sandy Hook, where all the ammunition on earth dries up,
yeah,
you're going to be like me. You're going to be the guy that has ammunition. Buy ammunition before you need it, because the price is not going to go back to what it was. That would be like waiting to fill your car up because you're waiting for gas prices to go back to what they were in 2005. And no matter who's in office, that's not going to happen. So it's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart. Go buy ammo. Suck it up. Buy it now before the price goes up. So
yes. All right, guys. Until next time, you stay safe out there. ZP002